Hey budget gardeners, Vita Loca here. Fall is in the air, and that means it's time to make an edit to a flower bed. So let's go. Here on the south side of my house, I have what I like to call the long border. It's a very long but narrow flower border. If you follow it all the way to one end, what happens is the long border basically ends, and then what begins is what I like to call a hydrangea border. We have a beautiful strawberry vanilla hydrangea, and you can see it is looking glorious this time of year. And then right next to it, we have a couple of quickfire hydrangeas that are also looking equally as beautiful. My intention for this space is really to make it a hydrangea hedge. And what you'll notice is there's a small gap between both of the quickfire hydrangeas. What I'm thinking of doing is adding one more hydrangea between both quickfire hydrangeas. And it really makes sense for that hydrangea to be a vanilla strawberry hydrangea. And I think by just adding that vanilla strawberry hydrangea in this gap will make this hydrangea hedge look beautiful. In terms of dimensions, this is a pretty long space. It is about 34 feet in length, but it's also a very narrow space. So it's only about 6 feet in depth. And here's the other end of this long, narrow space. I want to go over some of the plants that we have in here. Tucked in towards the back is a beautiful big leaf rhododendron. There is also a very pretty bridal wreath spirea. Some herbaceous perennials that we have in here include red bee balm or monarda, and there's also the beautiful echinacea purpurea or purple coneflower. There is a lovely huge patch of peonies. We have a couple of Stelladoro daylilies, and then we have an iris towards the front of the flower bed. In this space where there is a gap, and we'll eventually be adding the vanilla strawberry hydrangea, the plants that you see here are more of the purple coneflower, the Stelladoro daylily, some more peonies, and then we also have a couple of groupings of some lungwort or pulmonaria. And in the pot, if you're wondering what that is, that's an elephant ear. And if we continue to move in this direction, the plants repeat themselves. We have some more Stelladoro daylilies and more of the lungwort or pulmonaria. I had originally planted the daylilies in here because I had so many of them and I just kept dividing and moving them along. But what I find is they get hidden beneath the canopy of all these hydrangeas. I don't think it's a great place for them because it definitely is a shady area under here. So the first step is to remove all the daylilies. I'm just pulling away any mulch that I have around the base of my plant. I have a drip irrigation line right here, so I just want to be careful when I'm digging that I don't hit that line. I don't want to dig right at the base of my daylily plant. I want to dig out just a little bit from the base so that I don't ruin my plant. And I'm just going to use a large shovel to do the job. I'm going to tug and see if it loosens up on its own, and if not, I can always use my shovel and dig on the other side. And most of it came out, so I'm actually going to take off a bunch of the soil just so I don't leave a big hole that I need to fill in this space here. And I can go ahead and remove this daylily as well, and then I can just clean up the mess that we made. I really love Stelladoro daylilies. I have a ton of this plant all around my yard. If I didn't, I could definitely take this plant and put it somewhere else in my landscape. But since I have so much of it, I don't want to bother putting it anywhere in my yard. And as some of you know, I have a backyard plant nursery where I sell plants. This would be a great plant for someone else to add to their landscape. I recently made a video showing my process for when and why I would cut back a daylily after it's done blooming. I'm going to link it down below because I wanted to show you how beautiful my daylily looks here at the end of August after we've cut it back really hard. It's starting to not only push out new foliage, but it's also starting to push out blooms. Stelladoro daylilies are a reblooming daylily, so they'll bloom for you constantly as long as you take care of them. For my nursery, I like to sell my plants in small 3 or 4 inch pots. For that reason, we're just going to go ahead and divide this plant in smaller segments, just so you know how to divide a daylily in case you have one in your own landscape. Sometimes you might get lucky and you can tug and you can pull apart your daylily. And we got lucky, so we were able to get a small segment just like that. And believe it or not, I actually want to make my sections smaller than this because I want them to be able to fit into smaller pots. This piece might look very small to you, but it's a perfect size to fit inside our pot. And a lot of times people just want small plants that they can add to their garden and they can test out before they commit to buying a bigger plant. I just have some used potting mix mixed in with some compost. So we're going to go ahead and get this added in there, and then I can backfill. I just want to make sure that the roots are covered with soil, but that the base or the crown of the plant is at the same level as the soil. The good thing about daylilies is they are such a resilient plant. They're very forgiving. The soil is very dry, so I'm going to be giving this plant a very good drink of water. Now let's say you had a daylily out in your landscape. You don't want to dig out the whole thing. You just want to take a small section of it. You could definitely do that by using something like a hand shovel. You want to find a good place where you can make a division, let's say right here, and then you would go ahead and just cut right through it. And when you do that, yes, you might break off some of the leaves, but that is totally fine. And then you can go ahead and just pull out the section that you cut. I'm planning to leave one daylily on this side of the flower bed, but I'm going to remove the other one that's closest to the hydrangea. And on the other side of the hydrangea, I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. I'm going to dig out the daylily that's over here next to the elephant ear, and you can see where we already dug one out of its space. And then as we move along, goodbye daylilies. It's just way too shady for you guys. Even if earlier in the season when the hydrangeas are not so big, the daylilies are getting big and they might even bloom, but it's time to remove them from this area of the bed. I have to say it was quite comical digging out all of these daylilies. Maybe it's a good thing I didn't film it. Between dodging all of the water lines and the bees on my hydrangeas was quite fun. And in regards to what happens next with the daylilies, I showed you I'm going to be potting them up and putting them down in my plant nursery. And I'll be doing that outside of this video. But I want you to notice we did fill up a whole entire wheelbarrow full of daylilies. How great is that? So I kept the one daylily in place that we talked about, and I removed the other one from this area. And then over here, we have no more daylilies. And the same thing is true over in this area. No more daylilies. And the bees are loving their life right now, which is a good thing. That's what they're supposed to be doing. And then in this area here, I actually wondered to myself, I removed the one daylily that was over here, but the one that was over here, I was debating whether or not to keep it. But then I told myself, no, I'm going to remove it because basically, see where the plastic edging ends and where the lawn begins? I'm going to view this as its own separate bed. And again, I'm going to call it the hydrangea border. So for that reason, I don't want any daylilies in this area. I'm okay with having them at the very end of the bed, but I don't want them inside of the main part of the bed. And the reason is I basically want to do some sort of a cohesive design where it's basically all the same plants under here. I do love the lungwort or plumenaria in this area because they do well in shade. So for that reason, I'm going to keep them in here, and we will tackle dividing them in a little bit. But let's show you what we're going to do next. It pains me to cut these beautiful blooms off of my coneflower, but you know, I have coneflower in so many other areas of my yard, so they're there for the pollinators, for the butterflies, for the birds and everything else. And when you're taking a big plant like this one and you're going to be digging it up and dividing it or moving it around, it really does make sense. You want to remove the top foliage. You want the plant to put its energy into the roots. Do you have to do this? No. If you wanted to try to save your plant, dig it up with the blooms on it and move it, you can do that. I've done it before and it's worked well for me. But honestly, I don't know where I want to put this in my landscape. So for today, we're digging it up because it shouldn't be in this area. We're going to divide it while we're at it, and I'm actually going to pot it up. And if I can sell it in my plant nursery, that would be great. Or if I decide to put it somewhere else in my landscape, that would be great. I just don't know where it's going to go today. And something funny, we're going to go ahead and cut the blooms off using loppers. My hand pruners are currently in my barn. They're locked up. My husband has my keys. So we're going to make do with whatever we have. We need something to be able to cut the blooms off. And for that reason, we use my handy dandy loppers. I'm going to go right to the base of the plant and I'm just going to cut each of the stalks off. I don't often cut my own flowers to enjoy. I just enjoy them in my landscape. So I guess in a way, this project is forcing me to cut my own flowers and enjoy them, to just take a break from the busyness that we feel in our gardens. In fact, if you don't cut your own flowers, I encourage you to try to do that. And maybe next year I'll do a little bit more of this. I'm not looking to make any sort of fancy bouquets, but why not enjoy a small little thing of flowers in our yard? In fact, when I used to be a teacher, I used to bring in zinnias to my classroom as well as other teachers' classrooms. And it brought so much joy, I think, not only for the teachers, but for the students as well. I'm excited to be tackling this project with you because it's something that I've been wanting for a few years now. And I think it's just going to look so nice to not have that gap anymore where we're missing a hydrangea. I will share with you that when it comes to the hydrangea itself, I have some hydrangeas in my plant nursery that I dug up from the base of my vanilla strawberry hydrangea plant. They had suckered over the last few years, and when I was cleaning up that area this spring, I noticed the suckers there. Now, certain hydrangeas were not technically supposed to propagate, but with that said, I literally had the suckers coming from the base of that particular hydrangea. So the way I looked at it is, it looked messy, they needed to be removed, and I might as well use them somewhere else in my yard. It's not like I'm going to be selling them anyway, so it's totally fine. And if any of you have been following my channel for any length of time, you might know that a majority of the plants in my yard started off as small plants that came from my late mother-in-law's garden. Well, the vanilla strawberry hydrangea that I have was a small section that came from her yard. So it's nice to be able to enjoy it now in my yard. And let's go ahead and add the last coneflower into here. This is by no means a how to make a cut flower arrangement, but more of a what are we going to do with some flowers that we have in the yard and we don't want them to go to waste. And if anything, like I said, it actually motivates me to do a little bit more of this next year, to stop and just smell the roses, or in this case, the coneflowers. When it comes to digging, dividing, moving many of the perennials that I'm showing you today, you usually can do it either in the early spring or the late summer, early fall months. And that's definitely true when it comes to the coneflower as well as the daylilies. I have drip irrigation right here, so when I dig, I just want to be careful. Again, I'm not going to dig right at the base, just a little bit away from it. My husband and I spent a lot of time putting drip irrigation in many of our flower beds, so I always try to check for that first before I start digging. Although it is inevitable, I might end up digging into an irrigation line, but I try to avoid it when I can. It just takes a little bit extra to check for the line before I start digging. And I'm just digging on all sides here to help loosen up the plant. Let's see if we can pull it out. I'm going to remove as much of the soil from the base. You don't have to remove the soil if you are moving a plant in your yard. You can always take the soil with you. I just like to do that so I don't have to replace it in the hole. Even though I have a lot of videos on my channel that show you how to divide all the plants we're talking about today, just to recap, if you wanted to divide a coneflower in your landscape, you could always leave the whole entire plant in the landscape, come in with a shovel, or even a reciprocating saw like a sawzall, and cut right down into a section and pull that section out. Or you could dig up a big piece like we just did, and you could try to tug it and see if it falls apart. And in this case, there is one section right down here that I'm able to pull apart. And even if it doesn't have a huge root system to it, as long as the section has some roots and some foliage on the top, then that's a great plant right there that can get planted out in the landscape or into a pot. I'm going to be potting these up for sale as part of my plant nursery. I just want to make sure that the roots are beneath soil level. And again, right around here where the base or the crown is, that should be above soil level. Let's see if we can tug any more of this apart. I could also come in with something like a hand pruning saw and I could make some cuts in here. You want to be looking for areas where you can make a good division. So I'm trying to be careful but firm as I'm pulling this apart, and then I'm twisting it to take some of the roots along with my division. So now we have a second plant. I'll always say this in my videos, it's really up to you how far down you want to divide a plant. I love dividing plants down to small pieces because I know in a matter of 2 or 3 years, each of those divisions will become a nice size plant. We might as well just divide this guy down to as many pieces as possible. Seeing that we already dug it out of the ground, it's a good time to do that. One, two, three, four, five, six. We just turned one plant into 6 plants. And in terms of transplanting or potting up each of these individual plants, I will be coming in and I'm going to be removing a lot of the big leaves. I'm only going to keep a small amount of small leaves on my plant because the plant is undergoing a lot of stress right now. So to minimize the stress, it makes sense to remove or cut off a bunch of the big leaves, keep only some of the small leaves at the base. It's up to you how many you want to keep there, but you want to keep some because the plant is still using the sun's energy to photosynthesize. And what will happen is the plant can then put its energy into creating a more robust root system. Before I go further, I'm going to tackle the plants that we've dug out already. I'm going to do that off camera because it's important for me to do this right now. I don't want the plants to be sitting in this wheelbarrow for too long. So I'm going to take an intermission break, but for you, it's just going to be a matter of a minute. It took me quite a while, but here they are potted up. We ended up with 54 Stelladoro daylily plants, and again, they're in pretty small 3-inch pots, which is a great size for someone that just wants a small sampling of the plant. And then we have the 6 coneflower plants there on the end, and I did come in and cut off quite a bit of the leaves, but I left a little bit on there. They're looking a little sad right now, but they should bounce back, and everything has had a good drink of water. I'm going to keep these plants in the shade for a few days, and then they're going to go down to my plant nursery. And I still have more Stelladoro daylilies to pot up, and I'm just going to do these tomorrow. I'm going to add some soil in there. I'm going to water them, keep these in the shade, and then I can tackle potting the rest of these up tomorrow. But we made a pretty good dent with how many we had dug out. Next, we're going to go after digging out this beautiful peony plant. It is a very large plant. I know it needs to be divided anyway, but not only that, since we're going to have a big hydrangea in this area, it does not make sense to keep the peony plant here. You normally want to divide your peony plants in the late summer, early fall months. And just know that when you do divide a peony plant, there's a chance it might not bloom for you next year. I'm okay with that. I'm just going to use hand pruners and I'm going to cut back the foliage. When I'm cutting back the foliage, I'm just making sure to leave a small amount of the foliage still above soil level. It'll just make it easier to handle each of the divisions when we get the plant dug out of the ground. At this point in the season, I feel that the plant has everything it needs in terms of the tubers being fed for next year. And that's a big reason why you usually want to wait until late summer, early fall to divide your peonies. You just want to make sure that the plant has all the energy stored up for next year. I can always take each of these pieces that we're cutting here, I can cut them up in small pieces. And what I plan to do is add this to my compost pile because all of this makes for a good green material. If there was any sort of disease on the leaves, I would want to dispose of this in the trash. And for digging, we're going to use a large shovel. We'll move aside the mulch. I can see I have an irrigation line over here. I have another irrigation line over here. When it comes to digging, I just want to make sure I'm digging in between both those irrigation lines. I'm going to dig away from the crown or the base of the plant. Before I keep on digging, I want to see if any parts of this are loosened and able to come out. And since this was a very large peony plant, I'm finding that it's falling apart on its own, which is always nice. And sometimes you just need to tug at the roots to pull it out like that. It's like fishing. So we're pulling out any pieces, any sections that have fallen apart. Let's do some more digging. Let's get under this section over here. And we have one last piece over here. Just by digging up this big clump, in essence, we basically divided the peony. When it comes to dividing peonies, you want to make sure that each division has at least 3 eyes on it. So you know me, I love to divide plants down to single plants. When it comes to my peonies, I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that I'm giving this beautiful peony plant or plants a chance to possibly bloom for me next year. So for that reason, when I make my divisions, I want to make sure that each division has at least 3 eyes. There was one part that just fell off and it only had 1 eye on it. There's nothing I can do. That's totally fine. It's still good. I'm going to plant that. But come in for a closer look and I'm going to show you the anatomy of a peony plant. Earlier I called this a tuber. You could call it a bulb, you could call it a rhizome, you can call it a root, whatever you want to call it. Basically, this is our peony plant, one of the many pieces that we dug up. Down at the base here, you can see we have nice fleshy roots. And the reason we kept a little bit of the stem here is so we can handle this a little bit easier. These right here are called the eyes. These are the eyes where we will have new growth coming next year. So the eyes are being formed for next year's growth. If you wanted to, you could go ahead and wash this off so you could really see the eyes, but they're very prominent. They're standing right out. Some of the eyes that are above soil level are starting to turn pink color, but there are many eyes on each of these pieces here. Could you take this whole entire piece and plant it in the ground just like this? Absolutely. But let's go ahead and see if we can make a division right in here. And I'm going to do that just by pulling this apart. I'm pulling and I'm twisting it. And just like that, very easily, it came apart. And I don't care to divide this any more than that. We have plenty of eyes on here, more than we need. And that's wonderful. Now, you might see right here that it had cut or sliced a little bit. And the same is true for here. That is totally fine. Don't worry about that. The big thing is to make sure that you have your roots, at least some roots intact, that you have at least 3 sets of eyes. So if you wanted to plant this out in your landscape, first of all, make sure you're planting it where it gets full sun. If you don't plant it in an area where it gets full sun, the peony might bloom, but it might not bloom well for you. You also want to make sure that when you're planting it, that these eyes are about 1 to 2 inches beneath soil level. If you plant this too deep, there's a good chance that your peony will not bloom for you. And even though you have an eye down here, don't worry about that. Worry about all of these eyes near the top because there are plenty of eyes over here. Make sure that all of these eyes are 1 to 2 inches beneath soil level. And don't worry, I'll show you in a future video my process for getting this planted in the landscape. However, for today, I'm only planting these in pots and I'm going to be bringing them down to my plant nursery. I will not be selling these. I will most likely put them in my landscape on a different date. But before we do that, let's divide the rest of the pieces we have. So we have one here and we have its sibling that we just divided off of. So that's 2. Here's another section. Again, you can see that there are some eyes down here. We have some eyes down here. Let's see if we can pull this apart. Just like that. And even though I say it should have 3 eyes, if there were only 2, totally fine. But we have 1, 2, and we have a small eye over here, and we have some other small eyes over here. And time will tell whether or not this section will bloom for us next year, but at least it has a number of eyes on there. So that's our 3rd division. And we pulled that division off of this piece here. There are a lot of different eyes on here. Some are hidden down here. We have some there. And personally, I'm okay leaving this one the way it is. Could I divide it more? I could. I could come in with my hand pruners and just cut right in here if I wanted to. But I'm going to leave this as is. So that would be our fourth division. We have this piece over here. It has a lot of eyes on it if you turn it around. I am going to leave it as is. I'm really just going for the ones I can pull apart today. I'm happy with having this many eyes on this piece here. So that will be our fifth division. This piece is pretty large. There's quite a bit of soil in the center here. I'm just going to take some of that off so we can see what we're doing. I could wash this off as well if I wanted to. So I've removed some of the soil off of here. So let's see what we're working with. We have this one piece that's off on the side here. We're definitely going to be able to pull that off from the rest of it. So you can either tug or you can use something like your loppers or your hand pruners. You want to make sure that your division over here has some roots on the bottom of it. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to cut right in here. And that's a nice little division with many different eyes on it. You can see it's also sending out some new roots, and it also has some of the old roots on it. So that would be division number 6. I'm just inspecting what we have left, and I'm going to go ahead and actually divide this piece off here. We have 1, 2, but then we have a small eye down here, 3. This may not bloom for us. It may next year, but we're going to go ahead and cut this off. One of the benefits for cutting this down smaller, other than getting free plants, is that also when it comes time to planting this either in a pot or out in the landscape, it will just be more manageable. It'll be a little bit easier than trying to plant a big, huge piece like this. So I'm just going to cut right about in here. Let's see how that does. So it does have some roots on it, and that would be division number 7. See this large piece here? This will never amount to anything. I'm going to go ahead and just cut this off. If you weren't sure about that, by all means, if you wanted to, you could go ahead and just plant this in the ground and see what happens. My experience has been usually nothing happens with a piece like this, so I'm going to discard it. But you can definitely take it, plant it somewhere, and see if it ends up sending up some eyes for you. I have some other larger pieces under here. I'm going to cut those off. I used to be afraid to do this. I used to feel like that the plant needs all of these pieces, when I've learned over time that it doesn't. And it just makes it harder to plant a peony in the ground if there are too many pieces on it. And when it comes to this final piece here, I'm actually going to leave it intact the way it is, but I want to continue taking off some of these pieces that are extra, that are just too big. I want to make this piece manageable for me to plant in a pot or a container, or like I said, if I did want to put it in the landscape, that would be great as well. We'll take a few more pieces of these off the back. And that would be division number 8. When we were originally digging, this guy came out all by itself. It's very small. It only has one eye on it. We're not going to throw it away though. We just know that it may not bloom for us next year. And that's totally fine. We want it to put its energy into the roots, and it should bloom for us in another few years. That would be division number 9. And there are all our divisions. We turned one big plant into 9 smaller plants. So we're just going to find some pots for each of these peonies. That looks like a good size right there. And even though they're going in a pot, I still want to make sure I'm planting them about 1 to 2 inches beneath soil level. Just so that if I don't get these planted out in my landscape, then come next spring, when they start sending out their leaves, they have a chance of blooming. If they're planted too deep inside of this pot, then it's no different than being planted too deep in the landscape. Then there's less likelihood that these will bloom. So I'm just covering them up. And now you can see the reason why we kept part of the stem or the flower stalk in place. With this piece here, I'm just going to bend it a little bit. Peonies are definitely a plant that a lot of people have asked me for, that they want to buy as part of my backyard plant nursery. And I really haven't wanted to give them up because I just love them so much in my own yard. And I still have places in my yard where I would like to plant them. But you saw how many plants we got just by that one plant. We were able to get so many divisions. There will be a day eventually that even I'll run out of room in my yard since these need full sun, and I will have to start selling them, but not yet. And I don't want to rush just getting these put out in my landscape. I really want to think a little bit before I do that. Many perennials benefit from being divided every 3 to 5 years. Peonies are one of those plants that you don't have to divide that often, but you might be in a situation like I was where they're not in an optimal place. Maybe they're getting too much shade. Maybe they're in the wrong place where you want to plant something else. Or maybe you're getting them from someone else's house, or you're moving and you need to dig them up. There could be a ton of different reasons why you would need to dig up peonies. But of course, the number one reason is you just want more peonies. I mean, who doesn't want more peonies in the landscape? Here's one that has a ton of roots on it. We can see if the roots will fit in the container pot. So let's see. And it looks like we were able to do it. But if they weren't able to fit, I could always come in and I could have cut off some of the roots. All of the plants that I'm potting up today, when they go in my plant nursery, they will get healed into the ground. And what that means is I'm going to create trenches in my plant nursery, and all of the pots will have soil all around them, but only the top part will be exposed. And the reason is I want to protect all of the roots that are in here during the winter months. I don't want these roots exposed. So I'm going to make long trenches, and I'm going to place my pots. They're going to be huddled next to each other, and soil is going to be on either side of them, all the way down, just to keep the plants healed in and protected for the winter months. Here's a long, wonky piece. We're just going to bend it, but again, if I wanted to, I could cut it. I'm always going to try to bend the pieces first, just to see if that works. And you'll notice that it does not work because we want these eyes to be beneath soil level. So let's cut off this longer piece right here. And there you have it. We turned one very large peony plant into 9 smaller peony plants. We didn't go crazy. We didn't divide them down into individual plants. We will have 9 healthy, beautiful peony plants to plant for next year. I'm going to make sure I give them a drink of water and put them in a shady area for a few days before they go to the plant nursery. It's getting late, but I want to finish this project. You can see we have 4 lungwort or pulmonaria. They are all spaced kind of funny. I would say the 2 over there are spaced appropriately, and the 2 over here are spaced appropriately. It looks like we could add one right there, and it would look more like a pattern. And as we go in this direction, the pattern just kind of ended, most likely because I just ran out of time, I ran out of plants, and well, now we have plenty of plants to play with. So what the plan is we're going to dig up the patches of pulmonaria that we have here, and we're just going to divide them down into smaller segments. So let's get going on that. It looks like our irrigation line is right here. So when it comes to digging, I can dig in this area up here or in this area back here. I'll just be mindful of this section right here. When you have such a big piece like this, it's almost inevitable that it's going to want to just split apart on its own. And I have videos on my channel that show my process for dividing lungwort and pulmonaria into smaller sections. I'll put links to those videos down below. But for today, we're not going to be dividing them into very small sections because I want these to have a little bit of impact. So this might have possibly 2 or 3 plants in it, which I think is perfectly fine. So let's just put that aside for now. And let's see what else we have. And optimally, we don't want to be digging this whole entire piece out because we want to leave one section of it behind. Since it looks very pretty still right now, I don't want to come in with my shovel and slice right down the middle of it. I think it's okay to do that in the early spring months or right after it's done blooming, but I don't want to do it right now. I want to leave the foliage intact as much as possible. So we're just going to pull a piece off from the back here and another piece off right over here on the side. Out of all the lungwort in this area, I'd say this is the biggest one. So I would prefer to take sections off of this one if possible. And any leaves at the base that don't look good, now is a good time for me to clean up. And I'm just digging below the irrigation line that's right here. Now I can tug a little bit, see what we can pull off. So before we go further with this plant, let's get some of these planted out in the landscape and see how much more we need. I love using my feet to count. So what I did was from this one to this one was 8 steps. So what I did was I put a clump right there. So it's basically 4 steps to this, 4 steps to that. And then I added a clump here. It's 4 steps to this. And then it's 4 steps to this one. And the reason I chose 4 is these 2 that were already near each other were 4 steps apart. So nothing needs to get added in here. So again, if you look down, you can see that it just will look nicer. This year they might look sad, but next year it will look really pretty. Then it gives me opportunity in between each plant to add something else. Not this year, but probably next year. Time will tell. And then I can follow that pattern all the way down, at least this side here, and maybe add one more on the end there. I'm not sure yet. So let's go ahead and get one of these planted together, just so you can see my process for planting a pulmonaria. The ground is pretty wet because we have an irrigation line right here and it runs every day. So for that reason, I'm not going to be adding any water when I plant in the planting hole. However, if you were to do the same job and you don't have drip irrigation going directly into any plant that you're putting in the ground, then you want to go ahead and add water in the planting hole, or you could do it after you plant your plant, whichever you prefer. You can see that it's pretty sandy, pretty gravelly, but that's totally fine. Fortunately, we don't need to dig very deep. In case you ever wonder, why don't I use an auger in my videos? Yeah, now you see why. It's either tree roots or I have very sandy soil. And I have amended the soil over the years, but it's still pretty sandy. So now we can go ahead and, I'm just trying to clean up the bottom, but we can go ahead and get these planted. And we're just gonna tuck the roots in, and then we can backfill around the base of the plant. If I wanted to, I could add some biotone starter fertilizer just to help with the roots being established, but these are a pretty hardy plant. I feel pretty confident they'll be fine. We're doing this job pretty early in the season and we're giving this plant plenty of time to establish itself. If you wanted to, you could definitely come in and cut off some of the leaves that don't look good. You could even cut off some of the bigger leaves because the plant will continue to push growth from the base. For today, I am leaving the leaves on here, the bigger leaves, but that would be a good practice to cut off some of the larger leaves. The reason I'm keeping them on, I'll be honest with you, it's getting dark out and I just want to finish this project. But it is a good practice. It just tells the plant to put its energy into the roots and not into supporting all these leaves. One down and many to go. This was a pretty big project, I would say. And this project could just keep on going, but we set a goal for today and we got it accomplished. And I'm really happy that we were able to do this. I think that the pulmonaria will look so pretty as it starts to fill in. I didn't go too crazy with my divisions. In some cases, it was really just one plant, but I also know how quickly this plant multiplies. So I have full faith it's going to look great over time. And I took all my divisions off this one plant here because really it was the biggest one of them all. Plus it was the easiest for me to access. Some of the other ones were tucked in a little bit more. So I figured, why even bother? Let's just take off of one plant a bunch of divisions. And what ended up happening as we go this way is the hydrangea, even though I had cut it back pretty hard in the spring, you can see that it's coming right down. But it doesn't matter. I was still able to tuck in the lungwort on this side as well as on the other side. And here's the other side. And again, I used my feet and I just spaced them out 4 feet apart. And I can't wait until the spring when these are blooming and I can show you how pretty this area looks in an area that usually didn't really have much color during the early spring months. We will save this for another day, adding the hydrangea in this spot right here. I can't wait. And then just one final look. If you step back, I think it looks really nice and very simple, yet very pretty. We might as well end this video exactly where we started it, right in this same spot. I have a lot more spaces in my yard that I'm planning to edit this fall, so I hope you follow along with me, and I'll definitely give you updates on certain spaces such as this one later in the season, next season, and all the seasons thereafter. I'm going to continue making changes to this bed, but this was a first great start. And other than adding the hydrangea, I'm guessing most likely that will be it for this area for this year. Next year, we can think about other things. I want to mention one final thing. This area has daffodils in it. I don't know where they are. They're all going to pop up. And when they pop up in the springtime, then I can visualize and see where the daffodils are and where the pulmonaria are. The big thing is I want to make sure that the daffodils are not underneath any of the pulmonaria that we just planted. I didn't see any when I was digging, but you just never know. So that's one thing I'll be watching for. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it inspired you or gave you some ideas. And until the next video, make it a great day with gardening. And yes, I am loving the vanilla strawberry hydrangea. I always call it strawberry vanilla, but you know what I mean.